Chapter 5, Part 1 of Breaching the Marianas, The Battle for Saipan, by John C. Chapin. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. D+8 to D+15, 23 to 30 June. Complications of a serious nature arose in the execution of the battle plan for 23 June. The battalion of the 105th Infantry still had not cleared out Naphitan Point. There were semantic and communications differences between the two Smith generals as to orders about who would do what and when. The 106th and 165th Infantry got all tangled up in themselves during a march to take over the center portion of the American lines and were too late to jump off in the attack, thus delaying the attacks of the Marines. When the Army regiments did move out, they found that the rugged terrain in their sector and the determined enemy in camouflaged weapons positions in caves of the steep slope leading up to Mount Tapachaw made forward progress slow and difficult. The 27th Infantry Division was stalled. The Corps commander, Holland Smith, was very displeased with this situation. It had started with the difficulties experienced in getting that division ashore. It was exacerbated by the time it was taking to secure Naphitan Point and the mix-up in orders there. Now the advancing Marine divisions were getting infiltration and enfilading fire on their flanks because of the 27th's lack of progress. Accordingly, Lieutenant General Holland Smith met that afternoon with Major General Sanderford Jarman, U.S. Army, who was slated to be the island garrison commander, and asked him to press Major General Ralph Smith for much more aggressive action by the 27th. Jarman later stated, "I talked to General Ralph Smith and explained the situation as I saw it and that I felt from reports from the Corps commander that his division was not carrying its full share. He immediately replied that such was true, that he was in no way satisfied with what his regimental commanders had done during the day and that he had been with them and had pointed out to them the situation. He further indicated to me that he was going to be present tomorrow, 24 June, with his division when it made its jump off, and he would personally see to it that the division went forward. He appreciated the situation and thanked me for coming to see him and stated that if he didn't take his division forward tomorrow, he should be relieved." This blunt meeting was followed the next morning, D+9, by an even blunter message from Holland Smith to Ralph Smith. Commanding General is highly displeased with the failure of the 27th Division on June 23rd to launch its attack as ordered at King Hour and the lack of offensive action displayed by the division in its failure to advance and seize Objective 05 when opposed by only small arms and mortar fire. The failure of the 27th to advance in its zone of action resulted in the halting of attacks by the 4th and 2nd Marine Divisions on the flanks of the 27th in order to prevent dangerous exposure of their interior flanks. It is directed that immediate steps be taken to cause the 27th Division to advance and seize the objective as ordered. These objectives were given dramatic names by the Army regiments: Hell's Pocket, Death Valley, and Purple Heart Ridge. It was certainly true that the terrain was perfect for the dug-in Japanese defenders. Visibility from the slopes of Mount Tapachaw and from the ridge gave them fields of fire to rake any attack up the valley. Holland Smith didn't fully recognize the severity of the opposition, and by the end of the day, the 106th Infantry had gained little, while the 165th Infantry had been thrown back onto the original line of departure. Meanwhile, the 2nd Marine Division on the left was painfully slugging its way forward in the tortuous environs around Mount Tapachaw. The 4th Marine Division, on the right, pivoted east, driving fast into the Cagman Peninsula. There the ground was level, a plus, but covered with cane fields, a big minus, as the rifle companies well knew. A platoon leader remarked, "The terrain here consisted of countless cane fields, one after another, and it was the same old story. In every field the company would lose a man or two. It was wonderfully quieting to the nerves to start into a growth of head-high cane and wonder who would not be coming out on the other side. The Jap snipers who were doing the damage were dug in so deeply and camouflaged so well that it was impossible to locate them before they fired. And then it was too late. You were right on top of them, and they had nailed another one of your men. or maybe you. Then there was always the next cane field up ahead. Some of the fields had been burned out by the napalm bombing of our planes. This gave us greatly increased observation as we went through them, but clouds of choking dust arose from the ashes to plague us and dirty our weapons. With water so scarce, one of our chief sources of liquid sustenance was sugarcane juice. We'd whack off a segment of the cane with our combat knives, then chew and suck on it till only the dry fibers were left. In these burnt-out fields we weren't even able to do this, as the cane was spoiled and tasted lousy. Along with the death toll in the cane fields came the physical demands placed on the troops by the hot tropical climate. Lieutenant Chapin noted small human issues that loomed large in the minds of the assault troops. All this time the sun was broiling down on top of us. Our canteens had been empty for hours. Everyone was absolutely parched. Finally we did stop, as the effects of heat exhaustion and lack of water started to become apparent. Our company commander arranged for some water to be brought up to our position. When the cans arrived, everyone crowded thirstily around, and we had to order the men to disperse. Then each platoon leader rationed out a can of the precious liquid amongst his men. As was the age-old Marine tradition, we waited till all our men had their share before we took ours. The water was lukewarm, rusty, and oily as it came out of the cans, but it still tasted like nectar. While these local events transpired on the front lines, a major upheaval was taking place in the rear. Seeing that the Corps line would be bent back some 1,500 yards in the zone of the 27th Infantry Division, Holland Smith had had enough. He went to see Admiral Spruance and Turner to obtain permission to relieve Ralph Smith of command of his division. After reviewing the Marine General's deeply felt criticism of the 27th Infantry Division's defective performance, the admirals agreed to the requested change, and Ralph Smith was superseded by Major General Jarman on 24 June. A furor arose, with bitter inter-service recriminations, and the flames were fanned by lurid press reports. Holland Smith summarized his feelings 3 days after the relief. According to a unit history, the 27th Infantry Division in World War II, he stated, "The 27th Division won't fight and Ralph Smith will not make them fight." Army generals were furious, and in Hawaii, Lieutenant General Robert Richardson, commander of the U.S. Army in the Pacific, USRPAC, convened an Army Board of Inquiry over the matter. The issue reached the highest military levels in Washington. While the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Joseph T. McNarney, reviewed the matter, he found some faults with Holland Smith, but then went on to say that Ralph Smith failed to exact the performance expected from a well-trained division, as evidenced by poor leadership on the part of some regimental and battalion commanders, undue hesitancy to bypass snipers with a tendency to alibi because of lack of reserves to mop up, poor march discipline, and lack of reconnaissance. The Army's official summary, United States Army in World War II, The War in the Pacific, Campaign in the Marianas, published 15 years after the operation, attributed some errors to Holland Smith's handling of a real problem, and it also gave full recognition to the difficult terrain and bitter resistance that the Army regiments faced. The history stated that, "There is no doubt that the 106th Infantry Regiment of the 27th Division was late in jumping off in the attack on the morning of 23 June, even though not so late as Holland Smith charged. On the 23rd and again on the 24th, the Army troops attacking Death Valley were slow and faltering in their advance." According to the testimony of General Jarman, who took over the division from Ralph Smith, the unit leaders of the 106th Infantry were hesitant and apparently confused. Although the Army troops in Death Valley sustained fairly heavy casualties, the 2 Marine divisions on the flanks suffered greater ones. Yet the Marines made considerable advances while the 165th Infantry registered only small gains, the 106th Infantry almost none at all. No matter what the extenuating circumstances were, and there were several, the conclusion seems inescapable that Holland Smith had good reason to be disappointed with the performance of the 27th Infantry Division on the 2 days in question. Back where the conflict was with the Japanese, the 4th Marine Division had overrun most of the Chapin Peninsula by the night of D+10. The shoreline cliffs provoked sobering thoughts in a young officer in the 24th Marines. We were close to the northern shoreline of the peninsula, and right there the Japs had dug a big emplacement. They hadn't had time to finish it, but we could see that it was situated so as to fire right down the beach line. Any troops landing on that beach would have received a terrible enfilading fire from this gun position. Not far from the emplacement were the guns that had been destined to go into it, huge 5-inch dual-purpose naval guns. They were deadly things, and I was glad the enemy had never gotten them into action. Now they lay there on their wooden skids, thickly coated with grease, wrapped in burlap, impotent. The unfinished state of the Japanese defenses was, in fact, a critical factor in the final American victory on Saipan. The blockading success of far-ranging submarines of the U.S. Navy had drastically reduced the supplies of cement and other construction materials destined for elaborate Saipan defenses, as well as the number of troop ships carrying Japanese reinforcements to the island. Then the quick success of the Marshall's campaign had speeded up the Marianas thrust by 3 months. This was decisive, for one prisoner of war later said that, had the American assault come 3 months later, the island would have been impregnable. The 4th Marine Division encountered more than cane fields in the Chapin Peninsula. The cliffs near the ocean were studded with caves. A 20-year-old private first class in Company E, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, Robert F. Graff, described the Marine system for dealing with these and the others that were found all through the bitter campaign. The firepower was intense, and we were working our way up to where the shots originated. Quite often there would be multi-cave openings, each protecting another. Laying down heavy cover fire, our specialists would advance to near the mouth of the cave. A satchel charge would then be heaved into the mouth of the cave, followed by a loud blast as the dynamite exploded. Other times it might be grenades thrown inside the cave, both fragment type which exploded sending bits of metal all throughout the cave, and other times white phosphorus grenades that burned the enemy. Also the flamethrower was used, sending a sheet of flame into the cave, burning anyone that was in its path. Screams could be heard, and on occasions the enemy would emerge from the caves. Near the entrance, we would call upon the tanks, and these monsters would get in real close and pump shells into the opening. Graff went on to picture the use of flame-throwing tanks, the ultimate weapon for dealing with the enemy deep in his hideouts. He continued, "Some of the caves had artillery mounted on tracks that could be wheeled to the entrance, fired, and pulled back, unobserved. There were caves with reinforced metal doors that protected them from our artillery. Perhaps a direct hit from a 16-inch naval gun could have blasted it open, but nothing else." A fellow rifleman from Graff's company told him this story. "You should go up and see the huge cave that I was just in. It was large and contained a completely equipped operating room, all the medical equipment, surgical tools, etc. The tools were made from German surgical steel. When the battalion and regimental doctors were told about it, they almost went crazy over finding such excellent equipment. Each doctor wanted some tools for his use." End of Chapter 5, Part 1.